See us. Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
Time for a sofa upgrade? Introducing Anabay Sofas, where designer style meets budget-friendly prices. Every Anabay sofa is modular, allowing you to slide right off. Designed for custom comfort. To upgrade your living space today, sofas start at just...
Matter of fact, I have my own roster of... a few years later, I ended up becoming friends with a medical doctor here in the U.S., who is highly credentialed. As a matter of fact, he's a surgeon. And he started coming to some of my programs, and then we became friends. Then we ended up doing some trips together. And I mean, this was a serious, established doctor who'd won all kinds of awards. And I was surprised when he told me that he believed that Rife machines could work, and in fact have worked. And he's seen some evidence of this. And I was like, really? That was a big surprise to me. And so at that point, I started looking a little more deeply into it. But I've never really talked about it on this show before. And that's because, as you know, I always tiptoe around these topics that have to do with healing or medical stuff. I have zero medical background. As a matter of fact, I have my own roster of medical problems. So I am the last person that you should ever try to take medical advice from. And even though I'm a strong proponent of manifestation, I do realize that there are limits, and you don't want to give people false hope, because guess what? We're not going to live forever. And so eventually, no matter how well you treat yourself, your body is going to have to break down and die. And so I prefer not to address that, because I'm just not qualified to do it. So consider that a disclaimer, because this concept, however, goes beyond some kind of like magical healing machine. There actually may be something to this. You'll see what I mean, I hope. Okay, let me tell you first about who this guy was, Royal Rife. And I'll just give you the facts, ma'am, just the facts. He was an American born in 1888, and he died in 1971 at the age of 83. So he had a pretty long life. He was born in Nebraska and died in El Cajon, California. He was an American inventor and an early promoter of this thing called high magnification time-lapse cinematography. This is why I can't drink liquor before I do this show. Time-lapse cinematography. So here's what that means. Okay, time-lapse is when let's say somebody wants to take a video of the stars moving across the sky. And so what you do is you set up your camera, and then every so often, the camera will take a picture of the sky. The camera stays stationary, but the sky is moving around it. And so the next morning, you can go back and you can watch your footage, and what you see is a fast motion of all the stars moving across the sky. So this allows you to see very small movements in real time, much more clearly, because you're seeing them condensed into a shorter span. And so my understanding is, and I'm not an expert on anything that I'm going to tell you about in this show, because we're learning together, but my understanding is that he was claiming that he had developed a special microscope that could observe live microorganisms with an enormous magnification. I mean, I'm talking a magnification considered impossible for his time. And he could film them using a time-lapse camera so that he could see how these microorganisms would behave over time. And by doing that, he realized sort of more about their patterns, how they would grow, and he got to familiarize himself with all these different types of organisms that eventually may create negative effects, disease, and health conditions. And then he started taking different types of electromagnetic fields, similar to, I guess, what we would call a radio wave, and he would target these different types of bacteria and microorganisms, and even things like cancer cells and all that. And he believed that if you could just take your time through trial and error, and you scan through with your tuning machine there, eventually you'll find a frequency that matches that cell or that organism and destroys it. Think of this as being like an opera singer holding a wine glass. Everybody in the whole audience can be screaming at that thing and nothing happens to it. But the opera singer hits the right note and boom, the glass shatters. This is what he called an organism's mortality oscillation rate, also known as MOR. So he believed that all organisms, and to a certain extent all microscopic things, all organisms had a resonant frequency that could destroy them. And all you had to do was create this sort of catalog of, well, here's the frequency that kills this thing. And then you target that thing. Whatever's causing that disease or that sickness, that ailment, that cancer, you target it with these frequencies, and it will start destroying it. That was his theory. And you know what? In the beginning, a lot of people who were in the scientific field said that he might be onto something with this thing he called an oscillating beam ray. This invention that he said could treat various ailments by, quote, devitalizing disease organisms, end quote, using radio waves. And he came to collaborate with a variety of scientists, doctors, and inventors. His findings were published in some pretty impressive papers in scientific journals, like the Smithsonian Institution Annual Report of 1944. But the more people experimented with these, the more people began to roll their eyes and say they thought this was some kind of quackery device. And later, those findings and his work were rejected by the American Medical Association, the American Cancer Society, and mainstream science. Now, to this day, you can find some of these Rife machines out there. Over the years, a lot of people, however, have gone to prison for selling what they're claiming is a machine that can heal things that it can't heal. But so to this day, Rife has supporters who say that these impulses of electromagnetic frequencies can disable cancerous cells and other microorganisms responsible for disease. Most of these claims, according to the scientists, have no real scientific research to back them up. And Rife machines are not approved for treatment by any health regulator. Multiple promoters have been convicted of health fraud and sent to prison. So you should know that as we continue. But when we come back from our break, I want to tell you a little bit more about his life and work. And then I want to sort of give you my outlook on whether or not there actually may be something to this. If maybe the guy was not as much of a quack as they thought. After all, he never went to prison. I believe that he thought a lot of people were taking his device and maybe exaggerating it, misusing it. So you'll see what I think about that. And again, it's like I don't usually talk about health stuff, but to be honest with you, I'm getting any younger, so I look into these things, and you probably will too someday if you haven't already. Also, I have something interesting I want to share with you, a new development with the Mandela effect. This idea that maybe you've seen something that you remember, and then the universe is somehow switched, and what you remembered doesn't exist anymore the way you remembered it. Yeah, it's that kind of a show. And you know what? As I record this, there are some items that are being removed from my curiosity shop, and I don't have all the space in the world, and I'm a very small operation, and those items will disappear and probably not come back again, because I just keep creating new stuff myself. I don't know how long I'm going to do that, but if you're interested in seeing some things you won't find anywhere else in the world, go to the Curiosity Shop at JoshuaPWarren.com. There's no period after the P. JoshuaPWarren.com. And while you're there at the website, on the homepage, sign up for my free and spam-free e-newsletter. It takes you 2 seconds. And when you do that, you will instantly receive an automated email from me with all kinds of goodies. I write every single email with my own fingers, typos and all. And you can get started on your own mystical journey. JoshuaPWarren.com. I am Joshua P. Warren, and you are listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network. And I will be right back.
Hear that? That's what it sounds like when you plant more trees than you harvest. Work done by thousands of working forest professionals, like Adam, a district forest manager who works to protect our forests from fires.
Keeping the forest fire resistant is synonymous with keeping the forest healthy, and we do that through planting more than we harvest and mitigate those risks through active management. It's a long-term commitment.
Visit workingforestinitiative.com to learn more.
Time for a sofa upgrade? Introducing Anabay Sofas, where designer style meets budget-friendly prices. Every Anabay sofa is modular, allowing you to rearrange your space effortlessly. Perfect for both small and large spaces, Anabay is the only machine-washable sofa inside and out. Say goodbye to stains and messes with liquid and stain-resistant fabrics that make cleaning easy. Liquid simply slide right off. Designed for custom comfort, our high-resilience foam lets you choose between a sink-in feel or a supportive memory foam blend. Plus, our pet-friendly, stain-resistant fabrics ensure your sofa stays beautiful for years. Don't compromise quality for price. Visit washablesofas.com to upgrade your living space today. Sofas start at just $699 with no risk returns and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get early access to Black Friday now. The biggest sale of the year can save you up to 60% off, plus free shipping and free returns. Shop now at washablesofas.com. Offers are subject to change and certain restrictions may apply.
I turned off news altogether.
I hate to say it, but I don't trust much of anything.
It's the rage bait.
It feels like it's trying to divide people.
If we got clear facts, maybe we could calm down a little.
NBC News brings you clear reporting. Let's meet at the facts. Let's move forward from there. NBC News, reporting for America.
Here we have the Limo Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by its natural...
Welcome back to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Podcast Network. I'm your host, the Wizard of Weird, Joshua P. Warren, beaming into your wormhole brain from my studio in Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada, where every day is golden and every night is silver. Agitato Zume. And a quick programming note for you. Of course, I've been producing the show, hosting the show for years, and the idea is that a new show is supposed to come out once a week, every Friday, sometime in the morning or the afternoon here in the U.S., depending on your time zone. That's the plan. Of course, sometimes I can't do a show. I have other things going on, and you'll hear a best of. That doesn't happen very often. But I want you to understand that when I do this show, I produce it independently in my own studio here in Las Vegas. And when I'm done, I send it off to iHeart, and then that's the end of my role. And at that point, I'm just the monkey who makes the show. And once I've sent it off, I sit back and wait for it to come out just like you do. And sometimes the shows don't pop up when they're supposed to on a Friday because there are technical issues, there are computer problems at iHeart. It's a huge company. And other times you might find that there's a bit of a mistake when it's first posted, like the title's posted with the wrong show or vice versa. Those things get corrected. But I get a lot of emails from people saying, wait a second, I just realized it's Saturday and your show didn't come out yesterday. What's going on? And I have to say, well, look, sometimes the show gets delayed a little bit. I have nothing to do with that. Feel free to contact iHeart if you want to. But I'm just the guy who makes the content and sends it in, and I sit back with my fingers crossed and hope everything turns out well, and then you enjoy what you get there. Okay, well, let's get back to the main topic here, Royal Rife machine. There are scientists out there who, a lot of them actually, who will turn up a nose at you and say, there's no way you can be a scientist and unless you graduate from a school and you have a proper degree and training in science and proof and blah, blah, blah. But in reality, everybody can be a scientist, in my opinion, as long as you follow the scientific method. Science is not a belief system, it's a method of exploration. Do you know what the 6 main steps are in the scientific method? It's amazing how many people who are doing so-called paranormal research don't even know that, and they need to know it. The first step is to, simply enough, observe. You need to personally observe. Don't observe the person who observed the person who observed the person. No, you need to go have your own personal observations and then ask a question that comes from those observations. Step number 2 is to conduct background research, gather information to learn about what's already supposedly known. Number 3 is you want to form a hypothesis. So that means you want to come up with something that you can test to see if what you're thinking may or may not be right. Number 4, you design and conduct an experiment. So you create a controlled experiment, right, as controlled as possible to test this hypothesis and see what happens. You want to isolate all the variables. Number 5 is to then analyze your data and draw some conclusions to examine and see if it supports or refutes your hypothesis. And then if you think it's insightful enough, number 6 is to communicate your results. You go out there, you share your findings with others so the experiment can be replicated by them and verified. And if it's repeatable, then, eventually it will become something that might even develop into a theory. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are supposed to be using the scientific method, but there's a lot of subjectivity, unfortunately, when it comes to this sort of thing. And there shouldn't be as much as there is, but I think it's gotten worse due to the internet because there's so much out there that people don't know what to believe anymore. Regardless, here's my understanding of how a basic Rife machine would work. So let's say you have a box, and this box either has like an antenna on it that will broadcast a beam, or it may have plates that you can hold in your hands, or plates that you can step on. There are different versions that I have seen. And you basically have a catalog. And there is a frequency, there is a number for each different type of element. There's a number for having a cold, there's a number for having the measles, there's a number for having perhaps some type of cancer. I mean, like there's hundreds of these depending on the type of machine that somebody is trying to create and promote. And you dial in that frequency, that number on the machine, and then you just sit there and subject your body to it. And the idea, from what I understand now, is that people who promoted this, and some who still do, are claiming that these frequencies can go in and destroy the bad stuff. And in fact, let's see here, I believe there was, I was going to remind you, this kind of, when I was first reading about this, it reminds me sort of about a show that I did a while back called, what's about Grabovoi codes. Do you remember that? Grabovoi codes. These are codes created by a mathematician and metaphysician who I talked about them on the air. I told you all about what they are. And the idea is that there are codes that are almost like sacred geometry labels for every condition in life, not just health, but also finance, relationships, overall success, happiness, and then you can go through a process. If you just find the code for what you need to focus on at any given time, that code connects you with that thing, and then you can sit there for free with basically, all you really need is possibly a pen and a pad, and you go through a process of writing this code down and meditating on it, and then you will attract this thing into your life. That's what a Grabovoi code supposedly does for you. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's a fascinating concept. Go back and listen to episode 218 of this podcast called Strange Things. That podcast is titled Grabovoi Codes, and that's spelled G-R-A-B, like I'm going to grab your cookie. G-R-A-B-O-V-O-I. Grabovoi codes. Can they make you rich? And the pineal gland. That was another part of the show I got into, so you should go back and listen to that. I bring this up again because it almost seems to me like that this is an electromagnetic version of... This is a version of taking something like Grabovoi codes, but turning them into electromagnetic frequencies that can affect biology and physiology. And so if we look more into what they say about his work, basically says, like I said, Smithsonian Institution described one of these microscopes as equipped to be transmitted, equipped for transmitted in monochromatic beam, dark field, polarized. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that. This is a podcast. I'm not trying to bore you to death. But you can go read about like the process that he went through of taking what he found with the microscope and turning it into what we call a Rife machine. There are plenty of people out there who claim that Rife machines have been successful in curing anything you can imagine. And I don't want to go down the whole list of it, but what I can tell you is that as I look over this entire overview, basically the consensus was that this just does not work, and so it became such an issue that people who have continued his work have often been legally prosecuted. There's a whole list here. It says They're viewed as pseudo-medicine. In Australia, the use of Rife machines has been blamed for the deaths of cancer patients who might have been cured with conventional therapy. In 2002, John Brian Kruger, who operated the Royal Rife Research Society, was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his role in a murder and also received a concurrent 30-month sentence for illegally selling Rife devices. In 2009, a U.S. court convicted James Folsom of 26 felony counts for the sale of the Rife devices sold as, I guess, different names like Naturetronics or Astropulse or BioSolutions, Energy Wellness, and Global Wellness. That's according to Wikipedia. So people basically, you might be buying what is essentially a Rife machine, but you don't know that it's a Rife machine because people will take this concept, this technology, and then they'll apply a different name to it. So I have not experimented with a Rife machine in particular. I have experimented with a lot of other electromagnetic devices, and I have pointed a lot of them at myself to see what happens. Personally, I've never been interested in medicine. I'm the kind of guy who got grossed out dissecting the frog in high school. But I do know a lot about electromagnetism, more than the average person. And so when we come back, can't believe it's already break time again. When we come back, I'm going to give you sort of my outlook right now on how we should view this Royal Rife legacy and what it may or may not mean for the future. And then we're going to move along to something completely different. Maybe not completely different. I want to tell you something about the Mandela effect that I've recently noticed. Maybe you have too. This will be interesting. I'm Joshua P. Warren. You're listening to Strange Things on the iHeartRadio and Coast to Coast AM Paranormal Podcast Network, and I'll be back after these important messages.
Important messages.
Hear that?
Right. That the concept has, so, I mean, all kinds of pathogens. So, fungus. And to me, it seems like the Reich may have been ahead of his time. That the concept has some substance. The idea that you can use certain electromagnetic frequencies or radiation in order to kill certain microscopic things or alter them in some way that is beneficial. And, you know, I didn't really start seeing a lot of this UV sanitizing stuff used until, at least in my neck of the woods, maybe like 20 years ago. But it turns out, if you look at the history of, I went to Grok. I said, Grok, when did UV light start really being recognized as something that could kill germs and stuff? Going all the way back to 1877. There were British scientists Arthur Downes and Thomas Blunt who published the first study demonstrating that sunlight, which has UV, inhibits bacterial growth, and that laid the groundwork for understanding UV's antimicrobial properties. In 1936, in my home state of North Carolina, high intensity UV was first used to disinfect a hospital operating room at Duke University, dramatically reducing post-operative infections. And so the list goes on. I mean, so it's not like there is absolutely nothing to this concept of using electromagnetic fields to destroy microscopic problematic things. But I just think that, you know, so he may have been on the right track. But it's possible that he again, he was ahead of his time. He did not have enough technology, fundamental technology, in order to achieve what he was theoretically trying to achieve. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen someday. I envision that there may come a point where scientists turn right around and say, okay, we've had a breakthrough, and this is no longer science fiction. We can do this now. Because everything in the world is made of electromagnetic fields. Everything that you consider physical and non-physical. So why does it not seem possible that there might be an opposing electromagnetic field that can disrupt it and destroy it? So I have no reason whatsoever to believe that any Rife-oriented type product on the market today will do anything for you at all. But I do think that this is something that should be looked more deeply, and that we might go back at some point as a society and say, well, this guy had a good idea, and now we can actually implement it and turn it into something real. But unfortunately, there are always people who will take something like that and twist it around and abuse it and use it to use it for their own selfish purposes. But when Rife died, and they say he was basically penniless and obscure, it's one of those things.
Stupid